Tonight, the map doesn't look like geography. It looks like a warning label. Red zones bloom across the Middle East as ships redraw invisible lines at sea. And every newsroom monitor seems to shout the same thing at once. An Iranian leader issues a blunt message. If the United States strikes, the region doesn't stay contented, ignites. Anchors tighten their voices. Analysts point at arrows on screens like they can hold back gravity. But this isn't rhetoric. This is a fuse. Hissing in public, daring someone to pretend they can't hear it. Some cheer the tough talk. Others brace for the blowback. In capitals far away, officials calculate optics. On the ground, ordinary people calculate exits before it's late. For millions of immigrant families watching from living rooms in Detroit, London, Dubai, people who know what conflict steals first. This isn't a foreign story. It's a reminder that borders don't stop consequences, and that dignity is always the first casualty when arrogance takes the mic. So ask yourself, is this warning a deterrent meant to prevent disaster? Or is it a countdown? The final headline. Before the first sirening, what happened behind closed doors, right after that warning, is what changes everything. Because regional war doesn't mean one battlefield. It means the kind of fire that jumps borders, the way panic jumps timelines. One strike becomes a reply. The reply demands a counter. Allies get pulled in, not because they want to, but because politics punishes restraint and rewards revenge. The loop. Retaliation as reputation. Escalation as theater. Survival as collateral damage. And in this region, the dominoes aren't abstract. They're real bases where young troops sleep in thin-walled barracks. They're embassies where staff practice evacuation routes. They're crowded cities where civilians don't get to vote on someone else's strategy. They're shipping lanes that carry oil and food and medicine. The arteries of a global economy that pretends it's insulated until prices spike. Shelves tighten, and working families everywhere feel the squeeze. So when Iran warns that an attack could spark a regional war, strategists hear something colder than a threat. They hear a prediction about momentum. Once the first blow lands, everyone has a reason to claim they had no choice. And that's how history tilts quietly, bureaucratically, until it suddenly doesn't. For immigrant communities, this language hits different. You've seen how quickly a limited operation becomes a generational wound. You know the cost is measured in passports, in phone calls that don't connect, in parents who start packing documents before they pack clothes. That's why the word regional is the scariest part. It means this won't stay on one channel, in one language, for one audience. It will travel through diaspora networks, through markets, through fear, until everyone is drafted into attention, whether they consent or they're simply nearby. If you blink, you'll miss the moment the world slipped from tension into collision. But to understand why this warning landed like thunder, you have to understand the machine that benefits from escalation. The villain in this story doesn't wear a uniform or sit behind one microphone. It is a system with no face and appetite. The escalation machine. It runs on a simple fuel cycle. Outrage becomes policy. Policy becomes pressure. Pressure becomes provocation. Provocation becomes retaliation. Retaliation becomes a headline. And the headline becomes proof that the next response is necessary. That's how momentum disguises itself as inevitability. Every time tensions rise, the machine offers the same bargain. Trade patience for applause. It tells leaders, in every language, that restraint is weakness and caution is surrender. It turns diplomacy into a punchline, negotiations into appeasement, and empathy into naivete. Then it looks around, dares someone to be the adult in the room, and waits for the cameras to make cowards out of human beings, because optics are a battlefield now. In public, officials speak in hard edges and absolutes. They talk about red lines like they're permanent, not political. They promise consequences, not solutions. The posture is always the same, unblinking, unwavering, unafraid. But behind those podiums, in the briefings you never see, the tone changes, maps come out, timelines get shorter, risk assessments get uglier. Someone asks the question nobody can tweet. If we do this, what happens next? And the room goes quiet, because everyone knows the answer is never one thing. This is the machine's genius. It sells certainty to the public and doubt to the people who actually have to live with the outcome. It weaponizes confusion. It rewards the loudest certainty and punishes the careful truth. If one side says, "Let's slow down," the machine smirks and replies, "So you're afraid?" If one side says, "We should talk," it snaps back, "So, you're soft." It doesn't debate. It taunts. And it doesn't need a single mastermind. It has contractors, the hawks who treat conflict like a brand, the pressure campaigns that turn complexity into slogans, the propaganda loops that keep people angry, scrolling, and primed, the pundit panels that argue over credibility like it's a trophy, while families wonder if they'll still have a home next month. The social feeds that turn fear into entertainment and human lives into content. And when the machine is hungry, it looks for a villain the public can recognize. It picks accents, flags, and faiths, compresses whole peoples into caricatures, and calls it security. Overnight, immigrants become suspects, refugees become waves, and anyone asking for nuance gets labeled disloyal. That's not an accident, it's a strategy. Fear is easier to mobilize than facts, and hatred is the fastest form of unity. The machine also loves a deadline. It whispers, act now or lose credibility forever. It manufactures urgency, then sells it back as courage. Lawmakers angle for soundbites. Commentators demand decisive action. Pollsters measure anger like it's weather. Meanwhile, the same working families who can't afford rising rent will be told to accept rising prices as patriotic sacrifice, while the people who push the panic never miss a meal. This is how escalation becomes normal. One temporary measure, one limited strike, one final warning, until the exception is the rule. And when the bill comes due, it's paid in bodies, in grief, and in years stolen from children everywhere first. Here's the most dangerous part. The machine feeds on humiliation. Deterrence is one thing, preventing harm, signaling boundaries, protecting lives. Humiliation is another, making someone pay in public, forcing a rival to bow, proving dominance for the sake of pride. When leaders confuse deterrence with humiliation, they stop managing risk and start chasing a feeling. They begin to believe that looking strong is more important than being wise. And once that emotional equation takes over, don't look weak, don't back down, don't blink. Every off-ramp becomes politically expensive. Every compromise becomes a betrayal. Every apology becomes a surrender. The machine tightens the trap until even peace sounds like defeat. You can feel it when a warning, like regional war, hits the air. Instead of asking how to prevent catastrophe, the machine asks who can win the moment. It hunts for the clip, the quote, the punchline. It chooses drama over survival. But history doesn't care who went viral. It remembers who lit the match. And then enter the force the escalation machine hates most, a voice that makes the consequences feel real. After the thunder of warnings and strategies, a different voice cuts through human reality. In a small corner shop, a man stacks canned food under fluorescent light, pausing every few minutes to glance at his phone. He has customers to serve and relatives to call. He's lived through headlines that turned into checkpoints, through temporary crises that became permanent. He doesn't debate ideology. He debates whether to send money now or save it for a ticket later. Across an ocean, a young service member sits on a bunk, lacing boots with the muscle memory of training. On TV, strangers argue about strength. In the silence after lights out, strength feels like a promise you have to keep. Protect the people beside you. Come home whole. Don't become a symbol in someone else's campaign ad. And in a quiet apartment, a mother lowers the volume so her children can sleep. The screen still glows. Maps, missiles, experts. She watches the crawl of breaking news and thinks about names. Her sister, her cousin, the neighbor who fled once and swore never again. She knows how fast a region can become a family, how quickly a war reaches into the diaspora and starts knocking on doors in languages people pretend not to hear. This is what the escalation machine can't simulate. Tomorrow, most people don't want revenge. They want a morning without sirens, a paycheck that still buys groceries, a school day that isn't interrupted by fear. They want to be seen as human, not as a headline's collateral category. And for those who built new lives, far from where they were born, the stakes are double. You carry your homeland in your name, your food, your prayers, and you carry the suspicion that comes when politicians need an enemy. In moments like this, pride means refusing to let anyone reduce your community to a threat. It means insisting that safety and dignity belong to everyone, not just the powerful alone. So when a leader warns of regional war, hear it as more than bravado. Hear it as a forecast of suffering. If discipline collapses, of hospitals overwhelmed, of borders closing, of ordinary lives squeezed into suitcases. Real strength isn't the loudest threat. It's restraint when the world is begging you to overreact. But restraint gets tested when the cameras are rolling and the pressure is peaking. Pressure cooker / the moment diplomacy starts cracking. By dawn, the warning has metastasized into choreography. Every capital issues statements that sound like they were translated from the same hard, airless language. Resolve, readiness, consequences. The markets twitch before breakfast. Oil climbs on rumor, then climbs again on denial. In the Pentagon, in Tehran, in every Allied operations room, from the Gulf to the Mediterranean, the day begins with the same sentence. Keep it contained. Hour 1. A spokesperson says the door to diplomacy is still open. Hour 2. A senator calls. That door a trap. Hour 3. A general promises overwhelming response, and the clip outruns the caveats. Everyone is talking, nobody listening. The quiet people, the ones who count civilians before they count votes, are still in the room, but their microphones keep getting cut by louder certainty. Signals start arriving like static. A naval exercise that was scheduled weeks ago suddenly looks like a rehearsal. A routine flight path gets interpreted as a probe. A defensive deployment gets branded an ultimatum. Each side studies the others, moves the way gamblers study hands. Not for truth, but for tells. And because pride is watching. Even a pause can be read as fear. Social media does what it always does when history gets fragile. It turns anxiety into teams. Timelines fill with maps that simplify, clips that inflame, hashtags that demand loyalty. People who have never missed a meal declare war like it's a sport. Immigrant families watch the feed with a different kind of dread, already bracing for the moment national security becomes a permission slip for suspicion at airports. For hate in parking lots, for politicians to audition their toughness on someone else's identity, in the background. The near miss starts forming, not as one dramatic event, but as a stack of almosts. An anonymous leak claims a strike package is on the table. Another leak claims a retaliation plan is pre-authorized. A satellite image circulates with a red circle in no context, and commentators narrate it like prophecy. A commander receives a garbled transmission and assumes the worst. A patrol boat drifts a little too far, a little too fast, and someone, somewhere, locks radar for a second longer than procedure allows. Nothing happens. Then nothing happens again. And with each nothing, the pressure grows, because everyone knows how easily nothing becomes too late. The cool heads try to build space. Back-channel messages go out in careful language. Don't misread this. Don't mirror that. Give us room to breathe. Diplomats ask for time. Time gets treated like weakness. Advisors warn about spirals. Spirals get dismissed as excuses. A leader who wants restraint is told to consider the election. A leader who wants restraint is told to consider the street. The machine's favorite lie returns. You can control escalation once you start it. Then, late afternoon, the mood shifts. With one headline. It isn't even confirmed, which is the cruel part. It's a report source to officials familiar claiming a strike has been authorized, pending final conditions. The phrase final conditions lands like a match on dry grass. Within minutes, allies posture to avoid being surprised. Rivals posture to avoid being humiliated. Anchors stop speculating and start counting. The language tightens from if to when. On cable, analysts argue over whether deterrence is working, as if the only choices are strike or surrender. In chat rooms, people misquote each other into fury. A spokesperson says no plans, and it's heard as permission. A rival says we will respond, and it's heard as a bluff. Quiet hotlines. Ring messages go unanswered for minutes that feel like hours. The countdown isn't official, but everyone starts living inside it, even as everyone keeps pretending it's calm. And somewhere between the cameras and the command rooms, the last thin thread holding caution together begins to fray. And then, the warning becomes personal, because someone decides to test it. The warning lands like a mic drop. Not because it's poetic, but because it's logical. Step by step, it builds its own trap. First, attack doesn't have to mean invasion. It can be a limited strike, a targeted hit, a single night of explosions framed as control. But limited is a label, not a boundary, especially when images spread faster than explanations. Second, retaliation becomes politically unavoidable. Not because it's smart, but because pride is treated like security. If leaders absorb a blow and do nothing, the machine calls it weakness. Rivals smell vulnerability. Domestic audiences demand an answer. The spiral writes itself. Third, the region gets pulled in. Allies, aligned forces, armed groups, and neighboring states get dragged into the gravity of it, some by obligation, some by opportunity, some by fear that staying out is impossible. Fourth, the consequences multiply at sea and in markets. Shipping lanes tense, insurance spikes, energy prices jump. A distant confrontation becomes a global bill. In studios, analysts stop finishing sentences. Anchors recalibrate mid-breath. Officials dodge questions they can't answer without admitting how French all the math really is. And still, escalation voices sneer. Do it, they say. It'll be quick. It'll be clean. Restraint is cowardice. Wars don't start as regional wars. They start as small actions that nobody admits are the beginning. But the real shock wasn't the warning, it was what the world did with it. Within minutes, the speech isn't a warning anymore, it's content. Clips get chopped into weapons. Captions get rewritten like verdicts. The internet splits in two. Strength versus restraint. Deterrence versus provocation. One side demands action to restore credibility. The other begs for breaks before the cliff edge disappears. Narratives harden fast. They're bluffing. Some insist, as if history is a poker table. They mean it, others answer, doom-scrolling every rumor into certainty. Analysts argue over intent, while timelines argue over identity. Hashtags rise like flare, signals, each one a shortcut around nuance, each one a demand to pick a team. Governments do what governments do. Allies issue statements that sound supportive, but careful. Rivals condemn and warn, and everyone calls for calm while quietly preparing for the opposite. Words like de-escalation and proportionate response get repeated until they feel less like policy and more like prayer. And the irony is cinematic. While leaders posture for cameras, civilians brace without cameras. Families refresh, group chats, flights get checked, hospitals review supplies. Markets respond like nerves oil up, currencies jittery, investors sprinting toward safety. The world starts paying the bill before anyone admits they've ordered it. In the noise, truth stretches, fear travels faster than facts. And the people who need clarity most, those living nearest the blast radius, and those far away who still get dragged into the backlash are left trying to read the future through distorted glass. And then comes the question that decides whether this ends or erupts. The moral pivot isn't naive peace talk. It's disciplined power. Patriotism, at its best, is protection. Strength is defending lives and stability, not feeding a cycle that turns families into footnotes. The cool heads in the room, diplomats, commanders who've seen what limited becomes understand something the escalation machine tries to erase. Prevention is not weakness, it's competence. Yes, deterrence matters, boundaries matter, credibility matters. But so, does discipline choosing signals that deter without humiliating, choosing pressure that contains instead of ignites, because the most dangerous mistake in geopolitics isn't miscalculation alone. It's ego dressed up as strategy, and the public isn't powerless in this. You don't control armies, but you shape the atmosphere they operate in. Share slower. Don't amplify clips designed to inflame. Demand verification. Reward outlets that correct themselves. Ignore rage bait that never does. Refuse to binary. You can support security without cheering. Escalation. Make room for restraint. Politicians notice what crowds reward. In a crisis, the bravest move might be the one that doesn't trend. The call made quietly. The pause taken deliberately. The off-ramp chosen before pride slams it shut. History doesn't only remember who struck first. It remembers who had the courage to stop the fall. But if you think the story ends, here watch the next move.